interacting with other but
Yeah,
it
it's a
takes a lot of
mess.
effort that I just don't have
Yeah, Carlin's effort on
space
that
for right
part
now.
is that she will on Twitter troll like other right wingers. She will be on and off again with Nick Fuentes.
Oh
She
man.
cavorts with the Groypers, and she's like, actually, the Groypers aren't so bad. Ideologically, they're idiots, but like they're not monsters, you know. Like she went to their conference or something,
Uh,
and yeah, she's like, actually, I'm a monarchist. I want there to be a monarchy. Like there needs to be a stable like leadership, and we're not going to have it. You know, because with democracy, that opens the door for us to elect people. And she's just like she's really coming down with the line of like we just have to beat the left. I want to destroy the left, you
yeah.
know, and we
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
destroy them before they destroy us. Because if but the only negative thing she ever talks about is how we just want to take away private and parental property rights, and that's it. That's all.
Destruction,
That's the
genocide.
only. That's yeah, and all bad things flow from that, I guess. It's,
God.
she's married, but she doesn't have kids, from what I can tell. But of course, she's not going to have them on stream or anything if she does.
Yeah, that's true.
But she talks like so many others, where like, you know, if I had kids, I would want to be able to, you know, my beliefs can only be passed on vertically.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Even though I'm doing the stream. And anyway,
Right. What's
let's
going on?
continue. Sorry.
Man, I couldn't imagine being the only woman at a Groyper convention. That would just be. You'd
Oh,
think that would
I
be
don't think she
enough to
was.
completely
I don't think
rebuff
she
you.
was the only one, but
Really? Oh.
anyway, the Groyfer conference was a mess, and it was a sham. Like they got kicked out of their venue.
Yeah.
Why was it? Something went down.
I
I
think
think the
wasn't
Groypers
the
just picked a fight with one of their security,
I
and the security guy
that's
just
probably
like
it.
choke slammed one of them, and so like the police were called, and then so they had to vacate their venue.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. Was that the one where that one
Because the
pickup
security
artist
men were black, of course, and thus the Groypers were going to
Yeah, but there was that
antagonize them.
yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. I think I heard
Yeah,
about that.
such losers.
Yeah, they were just being thugs and they got kicked out. Yeah.
Obnoxious is the word I think we want.
Sure. Obnoxious. Yeah.
They're obnoxious.
But the manuscript has yet another and more far-reaching significance. Here, for the first time, Marx's attitude to the line adopted by Lassalle in his agitation from the very beginning is clearly and firmly set forth, both as regards Lassalle's economic principles and his tactics. The ruthless severity with which the draft program is dissected here, the mercilessness with which the results obtained are enunciated, and the shortcomings of the draft laid bare, all this today, after 15 years, can no longer give offense. Specific Lassallians now exist only abroad as isolated ruins, and in Halle, the Gotha program was given up even by its creators as altogether inadequate. Nevertheless, I have omitted a few sharp personal expressions and judgments where these were immaterial, and replaced them by dots. Marx himself would have done so if he had published the manuscript today. The violence of the language in some passages was provoked by two circumstances. In the first place, Marx and I had been more intimately connected with the German movement than with any other. We were therefore bound to be particularly perturbed by the decidedly retrograde step manifested by this draft program. And secondly, we were at that time, hardly 2 years after the Hague Congress of the International, engaged in the most violent struggle against Bakunin and his anarchists, who made us responsible for everything that happened in the labor movement in Germany. Hence, we had to expect that we would also be addled with the secret paternity of this program. These considerations do not now exist, and so there is no necessity for the passages in question. For reasons arising from the press law also, a few sentences have been indicated only by dots. Where I have had to choose a milder expression, this has been enclosed in square brackets. Otherwise, the text has been reproduced word for word. Signed, London, January 6, 1891. There's a footnote here too. Before the critique of the Gotha program was written, Engels wrote a letter to August Bebel expressing Marx and Engels' surprise at the program, and going on to criticize it. Next up is Marx's letter to W. Braca in Brunswick. This is from the 5th of May, 1875, written from London. Dear Braca, when you have read the following critical marginal notes on the Unity program, would you be so good as to send them on to Geib and Auer, Babel and Liebknecht for examination? I am exceedingly busy and have to overstep by far the limit of work allowed me by the doctors. Hence, it was anything but a pleasure to write such a lengthy screed. It was, however, necessary, so that the steps to be taken by me later on would not be misinterpreted by our friends in the party for whom this communication is intended. After the Unity Congress has been held, Engels and I will publish a short statement to the effect that our position is altogether remote from the said program of principle, and that we have nothing to do with it. This is indispensable because the opinion, the entirely erroneous opinion, is held abroad and assiduously nurtured by enemies of the party that we secretly guide from here the movement of the so-called Eisenach party. In a Russian book, Statism and Anarchy, that has recently appeared, Bakunin still makes me responsible, for example, not only for all the programs, etc. of that party, but even for every step taken by Liebknecht from the day of his cooperation with the People's Party. Apart from this, it is my duty not to give recognition, even by diplomatic silence, to what, in my opinion, is a thoroughly objectionable program that demoralizes the party. Every step of real movement is more important than a dozen programs. If, therefore, it was not possible, and the conditions of the item did not permit it, to go beyond the Eisenach program, one should simply have concluded an agreement for action against the common enemy.
This could be something of a line for like, why doesn't the left today, American left, have its own like manifesto? Where are the manifestos? Why don't we write any? And like that line there of like, one real step is worth 100 manifestos or programs in this case. Like you can write 100 little programs online, and we have, I've collated a bunch together for myself to use as like basically a talking points guide. Like if these are the things that I'll reference when people ask me, what do you want to do? What do you think we should be doing instead? Of course, they always ask with like, well, you can't do that because you don't have a political coalition or base. I'm like, well, I'm trying to make you part of my base. I'm trying to convince you of that. But anyway, and thus the program is good for that. But that line of like a concrete step forward. So it's like we're always trying to try to get that concrete step before we start writing manifestos. Or at least new ones where it's like it's very clear what we want to do and why, because we're still sort of always figuring that out, though the manifestos do help us figure that out, as well as taking that step of leap of faith, right, that we know what we're talking about. We're going to make a statement that will push people in certain directions, like say the Queer Manifesto in '91. Listen, queers comes to mind, and we don't have a lot of. Well, I don't know. I guess there are think pieces like that, that get passed around enough, but not something that's ubiquitous that really becomes a game changer as far as leftist dialogue goes. Maybe because of the internet, that there's just no one leftist discussion group occurring, that there's thousands, and there be overlapping, but it's going to create 1,000 little movements with 1,000 different beliefs about what's right. So anyway, that's what I was thinking from that.
Yeah.
But also like the translation there to translate of, I want to make it clear that I don't have responsibility for this bullshit, even though Bakunin, being a butthurt bitch, wants to blame me for everything that isn't cool about the German labor movement. It's even though I had nothing to do with any of it. He blames me for everything because I kicked him out of the the party and stuff, or the movement. and but he wants to clarify, at least with his friends, that like, look, when I stir some shit here and spill some tea, don't let me get pinned, or don't jump to the conclusion that I want to split the party up, or I'm a divider, or you're doing that I'm a psyop, as you were just
Oh yes, I was so
accused
recently.
of doing for
Yes.
sharing a Kap Mala meme,
Yeah,
basically.
it was a joke too about her being
Because
a
the Kap
god.
Mala meme is like it
It's
is a
something that
joke. It's
exists.
not a but just posting like that, like it's the pearl clutching, what is it called? Concern trolling, I guess. I know
Yeah,
there
I
was
think that would
something
be.
piffier, but the concern trolling of, we have to be careful. You can criticize Kamala, but you have to be careful. You have to do it in a way that doesn't help Trump.
Yeah, you have to always end by saying, but also be a Democrat. Just end by
Essentially, yeah.
shepherding people into the
Like,
Democratic Party.
so we have to criticize Democrats from the right?
Yeah,
What does
I
that
don't
mean?
know.
How do
I
you
don't
But
know.
essentially they're saying don't criticize, because there is no
Well,
way
yeah,
you
of
can
course that
criticize
was the
without
main
helping the
idea.
opposition, because in
Yeah.
their view, whether you criticize them from the left or the right, or the within, it's any conflict is hurting our ability to be unified and to effectively turn out the vote. Um Even though our votes are taken for granted, as we're going to come out and vote Democrat.
Right. As though they're
Um,
owed to the Democratic Party and
and
any other party stealing them away.
though the argument put by the concerned troller was also just like, well, it's this thing is although they said, like, Trump will, the new Trump administration will be good for Palestine, like, or it'll be better. Like, how dare you think that? Why would you think that? And we don't.
Oh, don't.
And
It's
let's see,
not for
RFK, I
Palestine
think
either way.
he's been making phone calls with Trump, which Kyle was making it sound suspicious, but it really wasn't.
Hmm.
From the clip that I watched, it was just a micro fraction of it, because like Trump uses the royal we all the time, like, we're gonna win.
Oh yeah, everything is we.
It's like, and it's like, Kyle's like,
Makes it
why
seem
do you
more
use
official.
we? Is he including RFK in the winners? I'm like, no, dumbass. Trump always uses we. We're
Always
gonna
is we.
win. We're
Yeah.
like, he's including anyone who's talking to. That's salesmanship.
Yeah, like nothing
You-
anyone's ever seen. This is always the way he phrases it.
Yeah,
As though other people have talked about it.
we've never seen this before in the
Mm-hmm.
history of our history and world history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We've
that's
never
just his
seen.
shtick. Yeah. So.
It's great KFAB. Okay.
All right, moving on.
But by drawing up a program of principles, instead of postponing this until it has been prepared for by a considerable period of common activity, one sets up before the whole world landmarks by which it measures the level of the party movement. The Lasallian leaders came because circumstances forced them to. If they had been told in advance that there would be haggling about principles, they would have had to be content with a program of action or a plan of organization for common action. Instead of this, one permits them to arrive armed with mandates, recognizes these mandates on one's part as binding, and thus surrenders unconditionally to those who are themselves in need of help. To crown the whole business, they're holding a Congress before the Congress of Compromise, while one's own party is holding its Congress post festum. One had obviously a desire to stifle all criticism and to give one's own party no opportunity for reflection. One knows that the mere fact of unification is satisfying to the workers, but it is a mistake to believe that this momentary success is not bought too dearly. For the rest, the program is no good, even apart from its sanctification of the Lasallian Articles of Faith. I shall be sending you in the near future the last parts of the French edition of Capital. The printing was held up for a considerable time by a ban of the French government. The thing will be ready this week or the beginning of next week. Have you received the previous 6 parts? Please let me have the address of Bernard Becker, to whom I must also send
Now we're
the
getting
final
into
parts.
some housekeeping.
Yeah. Yeah, some preamble, sort of. Mm-hmm.
The bookshop of the Volksstadt.
What's that?
No, but I'm just trying.
has peculiar ways of doing things. Up to this moment, for example, I have not been sent a single copy of the Cologne Communist Trial. With best regards, yours, Karl Marx. Now on to correspondence from Engels to August Bebel in Zwickau. This is dated March 18 to 28, 1875, London. Dear Babel, I have received your letter of February 23, and am glad to hear that you are in such good bodily health. You ask me what we think of the unification affair. We are unfortunately in exactly the same boat as yourself. Neither Liebknecht nor anyone else has let us have any kind of information, and hence we too know only what is in the papers. Not that there was anything in them until a week or so ago when the draft program appeared. That astonished us not a little, I must say.
They didn't include him on the list, sir.
Our party had so often held out a conciliatory hand to the Lasallians, or at least preferred cooperation, only to be rebuffed so often and so contemptuously by the Hasenclevers, Hasselmans, and Tolkas, as to lead any child to the conclusion that, should these gentlemen now come...
Okay, I'm going to admit I don't know who any of these groups he's talking about are.
They were political rivals
Lasallians?
at the time.
Okay, but do you know anything about their stances?
Yeah, LaSalle was another socialist. He was a thought leader, especially in the 40s, or maybe I'm thinking of the Saint Simon. There were a bunch of French. So these are French socialists, LaSalle. Sure. What was LaSalle's bag? I guess the point is that the Gotha program represents LaSalle's line, which is not to be, it's to be reformist. Like, let's just build up union power, and then and that our political party is about unionizing and socializing the means of production by just having union power. But I think what Marx's critique will go into is the sort of thing that really happened, which was you can build up unions all you want, but they negotiate with the bosses, and as long as that relationship is maintained, then you're still stuck in that dance eternally, and then you become union bosses. I don't think he went that far, but as far as the development of capitalism goes and how it was like consolidating and changing over the second half of the century, sort of like, again, that is becoming like, especially in Germany, where like you have this more monolithic corporate structure that the state regulated or at least coordinated. So it seemed really obvious that you could just nationalize and start having democratic management that way. And that was just around the corner. But the crisis of capitalism is the crisis of intensifying interstate competition. And I guess this would be good if the working classes were internationally united. But I think the big critique here is that as things developed with the SPD, that it became more of a nationalist party. And so the working classes were organized along nationalist lines, so that people were still Germans first and workers second. Or French first and then workers second. English, American first. And America first means that you're a worker last.
Yeah, that's true.
Even if you can use all the workers rhetoric you want, as the Teamsters union president put it, when he did a speech at the I covered this last week, didn't I? Oh no!
Yeah. I think you did.
Yeah. That his speech was still nationalistic. That was for the good of American workers.
American workers, yeah.
And it's America first.
Do for American
still
workers.
America
Protect
first. As
American
if
workers.
We could have any justice or economic stability without consolidation or coordination with East Asia.
Sure.
Like whether it's our global empire or a global world order, it needs to include them, and it's not going to be like on our terms. Be left out. Not on our terms alone. That is the reality of the multipolar world that any other Marxist or lefty will rant about. but they'll put it in terms of like, well, this is, I mean, it is a step towards internationalism that more and more of the world is on the level of being able to be a negotiating power. I think as the G7 becomes the G11, the G15, the G20, the G30, G100 eventually. That's what we're going to get to. Once it's G100 or G50, we'll have a world order that is no longer just the legacy colonial powers and everyone else.
Right.
It'll be a complete, shifting of the pyramid, I guess, if it's still a pyramid. And that's the pessimism in it, that it's still going to be a pyramid with 50 and then the other 100 will be below it.
Right.
But again, each passing decade, more of that bottom half goes into this, goes up a rung.
Right.
Fewer and fewer places are just completely destitute. Even Congo seems to have these more developed cities, and their civil war is more about who is controlling what is developed. It's no longer just completely undeveloped.
All right, let's move on.
And themselves proffer conciliation, they must be in a hell of a dilemma. Knowing full well what these people are like, however, it behooves us to make the most of that dilemma and insist on every conceivable guarantee that might prevent these people from restoring, at our party's expense, their shattered reputation in general working class opinion. They should be given an exceedingly cool and cautious reception, and union be made dependent on the degree of their readiness to abandon their sectarian slogans and their state aid, and to accept in its essentials the Eisenach program of 1869, or an improved edition of it adapted to the present day. There are a couple of footnotes there. Engels here makes a reference to one of Lassalle's program theses on the establishment of workers' producer associations with the aid of the state. Lassalle and his followers repeatedly emphasized that what they had in mind was a state in which power would pass into the hands of the working people through universal suffrage. Also, Engels made a reference here to the Programm und Statuten der Sozialdemokratischen Arbeiterpartei, adopted at the General German Workers' Congress in Eisenach in August 1869, and published in the Demokratisches Wochenblatt on August 14, 1869. The Congress founded the Social Democratic Workers' Party of Germany. By and large, the program complied with the principles of the International Workingmen's Association. Back to the main text. Our party has absolutely nothing to learn from the Lassallians in the theoretical sphere, i.e. the crux of the matter where the program is concerned. But the Lassallians doubtless have something to learn from the party. The first prerequisite for union was that they cease to be sectarians, Lassallians, i.e. that first and foremost they should, if not wholly relinquish the universal panacea of state aid, at least admit it to be a secondary provisional measure, alongside and amongst many others recognized as possible. The draft program shows that our people, while infinitely superior to the Lassallian leaders in matters of theory, are far from being a match for them where political guile is concerned. Once again, the, quote, honest men have been cruelly done in the eye by the dishonest. There's a footnote there. The honest men, this was the nickname of the members of the Social Democratic Workers' Party, the Eisenachers, as distinct from the members of the General Association of German Workers, the Lassallians, the, quote, dishonest men. Continuing, to begin with, they adopt the high-sounding but historically false Lassallian dictum. In relation to the working class, all other classes are only one reactionary mass. This proposition is true only in...
Okay. So they didn't, yeah. So that's there. He's hitting on why they didn't like the Lassallians. The sectarianism is that dividing people language of like, look, there's workers and then there's everybody else who are reactionary. Like shopkeepers are reactionary.
Sure.
Independent contractors are reactionary.
Do they mean a particular type of worker as well? Are they only thinking of factory workers or farmers, or do they include all?
Well, they usually include the word peasant, right? Was that in the second half part, or is that in the Gotha program?
I'm not sure.
The peasant.
I don't know
if they didn't, then that's probably what the stake is. But they were thinking of a particular type, because one of the arguments that went along these decades was like organizing people along trades
Yeah, yeah.
instead of sectors.
Right.
And we kind of see in practice why that was a bad idea to just like, because you had workers that were like, well, we can organize for our bargaining power because our skills are in demand and we're skilled labor. Then there's all the unskilled labor using that rhetoric of skilled versus unskilled labor. We can negotiate for a better deal in a contract, but we're not going to be in solidarity with unskilled labor.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
had all this skilled labor unions, pipe fitters, bricklayers, tradesmen, um, and we see it all the way to today, where they're all majority Trump voters, which is the case with the Teamsters president speaking at the RNC,
Mhm.
because a lot of Teamsters vote Republican, and they definitely voted for Trump. And Howie, being a Teamster, is an odd man out there,
Mhm.
but he's been retired now.
Gotcha.
But you see that in the trades where they just care
The
about their next
hierarchy.
job.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is peace or famine. They are wholly dependent on what capitalist corporations and developers are doing. So they are going to they're their partners, not the public, not communities, not people, they're very single-minded, and a lot of them aren't even like, I mean, some are family men, so you can speak about workers and their families, but like, and you can certainly pick them out, but like in the stagehands union that my housemate is in, a lot of the guys there are just these like angry, completely left behind by society kind of guys
Yeah.
that have nothing but resentments for everybody, or
Like
projections from their.
MGTOW types, are you talking? Or
No, these are all like older Gen X or Boomer type
Mhm.
guys. No, just in that immature, no emotional intelligence. Like
Oh, okay.
they tease you and drag on you when you're doing a good job. They drag on you when you're doing a bad job. They drag on you when you're neutral. They drag on you. They always drag, and they always got to complain about
Yeah.
you. They always got
Yeah,
to
yeah.
tease you. They always got to joke. They cannot ever, and they can't take a joke about themselves, and they can't like take them to think about themselves. They don't have an interior life. It's very sad, but it's also angry because you don't want to work with these people. Um, they just they just want to get a rise out of you, and it's funny, or that's how they entertain themselves. And they're bullies all the time, but they're also cry bullies, and they're cowards and blah blah blah, and they don't actually do a good job themselves, and they sit around and they just
Yeah.
want to do as little as possible.
Always
Um,
excuses
yeah.
about why they didn't do well with everyone else. Yep.
No, it's your fault. Oh, what's up? What's the problem, man?
Yeah.
Like you work too fast and they complain. When you're having a bad day and you need to slow down, they complain about you. Like,
Yep.
oh, what's the matter? You can't do what happened to the fast version of you.
Yep.
They got to drag you down no matter what. And of course, tons of people in the underclass or just working class will always be like, the problem around me, or it's not the bosses, it's not capitalism, it's just the assholes around me dragging me down. If it just
That's
wasn't for
right.
them, you got to get rid of them, push them out of your life, then I'll succeed and I'll be an entrepreneur and I'll build a customer base, blah blah blah. And some of them do.
Mhm.
um
Sure.
but there's only so many catering businesses that can do well in this area, and of course those that do well eventually will move their operations out to the suburbs because their customer base that can afford them
Yep.
is out in the suburbs. And that's what happened with like any soul food place that is doing well, like
Really.
Alley B's. Like they had a place on Lark Street or Main Drag,
Mhm.
and but because their entrees are like $20-$25, and take a while too, but delicious, right? It's delicious soul food. But they needed to expand their operations, and so and as far as their customer base makes sense, they're out it's still within Albany, but it's just at the very edge, where on the in the Strode areas.
Makes sense. All right. Let's continue.
In certain exceptional instances. For example, in the case of a revolution by the proletariat, e.g., the Commune, or in a country in which not only has the bourgeoisie constructed state and society after its own image, but the democratic petty bourgeoisie, in its wake, has already carried that reconstruction to its logical conclusion. If, for instance, in Germany, the democratic petty bourgeoisie were part of this reactionary mass, then how could the Social Democratic Workers' Party have gone hand in hand with it, with the People's Party, for years on end? Footnote there, the German People's Party, established in September 1868, embraced the democratic section of the bourgeoisie, mostly in the South German states. The party opposed the establishment of Prussian hegemony in Germany and advocated the idea of a federative German state. How could the Volksstaat, the organ of the Eisenachers, derive virtually all its political content from the petty bourgeois democratic Frankfurter Zeitung? And how can one explain the adoption in this same program of no less than 7 demands that coincide exactly and word for word with the program of the People's Party and of petty bourgeois democracy? I mean the 7 political demands, 1 to 5 and 1 to 2, of which there is not one that is not bourgeois democratic. Footnote there. This is a reference to the following articles of the draft Gotha program. Quote, the German Workers' Party demands, as the free basis of the state, 1. Universal, equal, and direct suffrage by secret ballot for all males who have reached the age of 21, for all elections in the state and in the community. 2. Direct legislation by the people with the right to initiate and to reject
This is
bills.
what I just read.
3. Universal military training, a people's militia in place of the standing army, decisions regarding war and peace to be taken by a representative assembly of the people. 4. Abolition of all exceptional laws, in particular the laws on the press, associations, and assembly. 5. Jurisdiction by the people, administration of justice without fees. The German Workers' Party demands as the intellectual and moral basis of the state, 1. Universal and equal education of the people by the state, compulsory school attendance, free instruction. 2. Freedom of science, freedom of conscience. Unquote. Back to the text. Secondly, the principle that the workers' movement is an international one is, to all intents and purposes, utterly denied in respect of the present, and this by men who, in the space of 5 years, and under the most difficult conditions, upheld that principle in the most laudable manner. The German workers' position in the European movement rests essentially on their genuinely international attitude during the war. No other proletariat would have behaved as well. Footnote there is a reference to the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 71. And now this principle is to be denied by them at a moment when, everywhere abroad, workers are stressing it all the more by reason of the efforts made by governments to suppress every attempt at its practical application in an organization. And what is left of the internationalism of the workers' movement? The dim prospect, not even of subsequent cooperation among European workers with a view to their liberation, nay, but of a future, quote, international brotherhood of peoples, of your Peace League bourgeois United States of Europe. Footnote there, the League of Peace and Freedom was a pacifist organization set up in Switzerland in 1867 with the active participation of Victor Hugo, Giuseppe Garibaldi, and other Democrats. The League asserted that it was possible to prevent wars by creating the, quote, United States of Europe. Its leaders did not disclose the social sources of wars and often confined anti-militarist activity to mere declarations. At the General Council meeting of August 13, 1867, Marx spoke against the International's official participation in the League's inaugural Congress, since this would have meant solidarity with its bourgeois program, but recommended that some members of the International should attend the Congress in their personal capacity in order to support revolutionary democratic decisions. See Marx's letter to Engels of September 4, 1867. Back to the text.
Hey, we do that all the
time. There was,
time.
of course, no need whatever to mention the International.
Don't we do that all the time?
Do which? What,
Maybe not.
I'm sorry. What? Do
attend conferences.
Oh, attend
we
conferences.
don't
Yes.
attend on joining or agreeing with, but to stir and to outreach and to maybe find some friends.
That's right.
This weekend I'm going, well, I'm not going anywhere, but every 2 years the Socialist Party US has their online conference, and I'll be doing some of that and see what's up with that. My local chapter head, who's also on the national level leadership too, will tell me it's very interesting people, a lot of armchair people, a lot of space cases, and He's like, "You're not selling it very well, man." And actually, he doesn't. He's very honest, I guess, in that way. He does not actually sell the SP very well. In fact, I'm not even. I was never actually. I suppose I've taken the same tack sometimes, but it depends on who I'm talking to. Um, I don't. I don't think my friends ever tried to convince me to join the SP, but I did so to help them. Um, but then as soon as I did, I found out my dues do not go to locals.
Oh, really?
They're not shared at all.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Not
"Oh,
shared at all.
well, then I guess I'm not really and I signed up for the annual membership. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of this year, I will probably end it. Yeah, I think I most certainly will actually, and simply give my socialist friends $80,
Yeah. Well,
every year.
how do the locals raise money then, if not through dues? And just by
Well, at the first meeting I showed up,
Mhm.
we passed the hat.
Really?
And the very freaking reason I would join a dues paying organization is so that I don't have to pass the
Wait,
fucking
no one
hat.
wants to do that. God.
Yeah, no one really wants to do it. Well, unless you're in church.
That's such a shaky,
Uh
volatile
and
system
and
of
that's one of the
funding.
reasons a lot of people don't go to church.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, if you want to support your community, we pass around the hat and literally a basket, and you put some dollars in there, and that will go to helping the community.
that's so
Well,
stupid.
yeah.
How do you even budget with that as your fundraising source? Like,
Well, just the
you
fact
just
that, like, okay, it
hope
goes to
that
the
people.
national. What's the national doing with it?
Bro, it is the national deal with it. That's a good point too.
And I guess I'll try to figure that out with the going to the conference. It's like, is there a budget meeting that I can? Is there an open budget I can look at? Because I know if IWW, I can look at what they're spending the money on. They do their quarterly
Yeah,
report, and they
they
call it
have
the
some
GOB,
integrity. Yeah.
General Organization Bulletin. Yeah, GOB, and oh my GOB, and yes, yeah, the IWW has a lot more integrity, and they share dues, and in fact, yeah, I think it's most of it, and they have their committees, which the committees themselves, they have funds and things that you have to individually, I think, put money in, but maybe that's on top of what they've allocated from the main budget. But I can see what they're spending the money on, and that they have the funds of money. And the Green Party is the same. We have a fund so that, like, for our convention is a lot more money. Their convention is just $20. Our convention is 125, but it's a sliding scale. So that, like, in fact, it's 100, but me paying 125, I'm putting 25 into the fund to help people, so that so it can be sliding scale, so that you can pay 50, and me and one other person is paying half of your way. Um, yeah. So, and that there is that fund, and then I think I actually made use of it at one point when I was part timer. And I think I got $50 or something. I did not get funds to run for office, but that's understandable. I did not have a full team working with me, so if I did, it would be like, you don't invest in something that isn't really there. You need a viable campaign, as it were, but viable is not the word. A robust campaign. Anyway, back to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the politics of the day, the 1870s.
Yeah. Although I mean,
Franco-Prussian War, the last war that Germany won, so it gave them a lot of, like, air of, like, we can win wars. We always win our wars. We can just rush in and get to Paris in a month,
yeah.
because that's how long it took.
So it sounds
Um,
like what they were talking about with that what was that, the peace and freedom whatever compact, the United States of Europe. It sounds like they're
well,
basically
that was just a peace
describing.
conference. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like they're basically describing what ended up becoming uh the Eurozone, right? So just like
It's
peace and
a
freedom
it's
through
the it's
economics.
the it's a spur. I would consider it, using a biological metaphor, like one of the sperm,
Ah, okay.
with the egg being the institutions created by the U.S. after the Second World War, which was the economic zone created via the Marshall Plan that opened up, the customs union
True.
between West Germany, France,
Yeah.
and others. And it only started with like 8 of the members, and that became the Eurozone later. Because it was you had a euro dollar that they were using.
Mhm.
And part of the transition to the finance capital in the 70s was that the euro dollar was getting so much investment that it was like many times over more valuable than our entire economy. So much, like all the capitalists were they were investing in euro dollars for some reason. Or no, it was a way of getting around taxes and stuff. So if they weren't putting in offshore accounts, they were putting in the euro dollar because you could put your money into currencies and currency trading, and thus take it out of circulation. And as it's being traded, the valuation goes up, I guess, like cryptocurrency, and it was a boom. And it made the gold standard, which was only like ceremonial at that point, untenable. And that's why we went off the gold standard. Because the thing about like free trade and ANCAPs, I guess, is like good capitalism requires, or stable capitalism requires, good money, which means gold standard money that doesn't fluctuate in its value.
Yeah.
Which is why we really didn't have a lot of inflation outside of some, small increases here and there
Sure.
over the course of 400 years. From the institution of the gold standard by Queen Elizabeth. And then in 1970, everything goes up 4 times in value. Though that doesn't, right? Yeah, and that's because of and I guess in the Weimar Republic, they did not have a gold standard currency, I guess, and that's why any currency who has hyperinflation is because they don't have sound money, because their currency is floating, it's a tradable commodity, and thus, can do that.
Indeed. All right, moving on.
As such. But at the very least, there should have been no going back on the program of 1869, and some sort of statement to the effect that, though first of all the German Workers' Party is acting within the limits set by its political frontiers, it has no right to speak in the name of the European proletariat, especially when what it says is wrong. It is nevertheless conscious of its solidarity with the workers of all other countries, and will, as before, always be ready to meet the obligations that solidarity entails. Such obligations, even if one does not definitely proclaim or regard oneself as part of the international, consist, for example, in aid, abstention from blacklegging during strikes, making sure that the party organs keep German workers informed of the movement abroad, agitation against impending or incipient dynastic wars, and, during such wars, an attitude such as was exemplarily maintained in 1870 and 1871, etc. Thirdly, our people have allowed themselves to be saddled with the Lassallean iron law of wages, which is based on a completely outmoded economic view, namely that on average the workers receive only the minimum wage because, according to the Malthusian theory of population, there are always too many workers. Such was Lassalle's reasoning. Now, in Capital, Marx has amply demonstrated that the laws governing wages are very complex, that, according to circumstances, now this law, now that holds sway, that there are therefore no means iron, but are on the contrary exceedingly elastic, and that the subject really cannot be dismissed in a few words, as Lassalle imagined. Malthus's argument, upon which the law Lassalle derived from him and Ricardo, whom he
I just remember what the critique of the Gottman program, like he gets into like why we need how we actually end the wage slavery.
Mm-hmm.
He goes into like what a socialist program really is, because you're like people are like, oh, Marx is a theorist, he doesn't, but what does it take to go to socialism? The critique of the Gottman program, we're reading this because this is him outlaying what the what you do politically.
Yeah. How to
Like, this
actually
is a
achieve
political
socialism.
argument. And it's in response to the politics of the day and all
Mhm.
the arguments and all that stuff. And it's just, oh, doesn't it hit hard, Zach? The whole, like, the idealism, because LaSallists were kind of idealists in that, like,
Yeah.
they're using Malthusianism to describe why the minimum wage is what it is. We still have that. We still have this thinking. I mean, especially among capitalist boosters. Of, I mean, I guess it's among capitalists themselves, and we're all, any kind of good leftist will be pushing back against this, and when we talk of, like, there's no such thing as unskilled labor. There's no such thing as too many workers, and, like,
Mhm.
or whatever.
There's no such thing as surplus population.
Yeah, surplus population. There's no surplus workers.
Yeah.
But LaSalle and the others were like, well, how do we break the wage slavery if we can't raise the minimum wage? We just have to do this or that, or, like, their program didn't make sense, or, like, if it was implemented, it led to the extensions of the problem, as we kind of still have today, I suppose, in various ways.
Mhm.
But we still have this logic going, like, it's still
Yeah,
polluting
it's still around, alive and kicking.
And I guess you didn't when you had Marxist education, but at the same time, in the Soviet Union, we could critique that the Marxist education you're getting was a revisionist version of Marx,
Mhm.
or at least it was kind of taking things a little too literally and not developing it further,
Right.
as other neo-Marxists do eventually now. That's what Piketty's book is about. That's what other books these days, and the long 20th century does. And there's a lot of other economists that have expanded on this.
Okay.
Interpreted is based, as that argument appears, for instance, on page 5 of the Arbeiterlesebuch, where it is quoted from another pamphlet of Lassalle's, is exhaustively refuted by Marx in the section on accumulation of capital. Thus, by adopting the Lassallean iron law, one commits oneself to a false proposition and false reasoning in support of the same. Fourthly, as its one and only social demand, this program puts forward Lassallean state aid in its starkest form, as stolen by Lassalle from Boucher. Footnote there, Philippe Joseph Boucher, one of the first ideologists of the so-called Christian socialism, advanced a plan for the establishment of workers' producer associations with the aid of the state. So basically, state funding for worker co-ops. Continuing, and this, after Braca has so ably demonstrated the sheer futility of that demand, after almost all, if not all, of our party speakers have, in their struggle against the Lassalleans, been compelled to make a stand against this state aid. Our party could hardly demean itself further. Internationalism sunk to the level of Amant Gueug, socialism to that of the bourgeois republican Boucher, who confronted the socialists with this demand in order to supplant them. But state aid in the Lassallean sense of the word is, after all, at most only one measure among many others for the attainment of an end here, lamely described as, quote, paving the way for the solution of the social question, as though, in our case, there were still a social question that remained unsolved in theory. Thus, if you were to say, the German Workers' Party strives to abolish wage labor and hence class distinctions by introducing cooperative production into industry and agriculture and on a national scale, it is in favor of any measure calculated to attain that end, then no Lassallean could possibly object. Fifthly, there is absolutely no mention of the organization of the working class as a class through the medium of trade unions. And that is a point of the utmost importance, this being the proletariat's true class organization, in which it fights its daily battles with capital, in which it trains itself.
I think in that case,
now...
I must be wrong when I am saying, like, this, the GAPA program is about unionization, because it isn't about unionization. It's about creating worker associations and co-ops funded by the funded by the state, as if that's enough, but we recognize that co-ops are still working in a market capitalist economy and subject to wage exchange and whatever.
Yeah, and without an international communism, are still exploiting other people around.
And dependent on, say, aid, which in Germany's case would be Bismarck, the Bismarck state that's militarist and making war and whatever else. Yeah, it's interesting how I draw a preliminary conclusion of what the GAPA program means, but actually it means the opposite. Because the language used is important in that, like, the social question. I interpret that as meaning the antagonism between classes, but in fact, of course, Marx and Engels say, well, no, they're not saying that. We say that. That's why we're opposing each other.
Right. Yeah.
Our program is about class struggle. Theirs is about, oh yeah, the state can just fund
Yeah.
co-ops, and
More
that will,
reformist. Yeah.
yeah, it's reformist.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I would like the state to, co-op law and incentivize co-ops.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. Yeah.
But it's not, of course, it's not the full agenda.
It's not the end state. No.
And
No.
I think the
Moves
critique
the
is that
needle.
this is the platform that would be the agenda.
Yeah.
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 And it is only 8 parts for that, that reason.
Nowadays can no longer simply be smashed, even with reaction at its worst, as presently in Paris. Considering the importance this organization is likewise assuming in Germany, it would, in our view, be indispensable to accord it some mention in the program, and possibly to leave some room for it in the organization of the party. All these things have been done by our people to oblige the Lassallians. And what had the others conceded? That a host of somewhat muddled and purely democratic demands should figure in the program, some of them being of a purely fashionable nature. For instance, legislation by the people, such as exists in Switzerland and does more harm than good, if it can be said to do anything at all. Administration by the people, that would at least be something. Similarly omitted is the first prerequisite of all liberty, that all officials be responsible for all their official actions to every citizen before the ordinary courts and in accordance with the common law. That demands such as freedom of science and freedom of conscience figure in every liberal bourgeois program and seem a trifle out of place here is something I shall not enlarge upon. The free people's state is transformed into the free state. Grammatically speaking, a free state is one in which the state is free vis-a-vis its citizens. A state, that is, with a despotic government. All of the palaver about the state ought to be dropped, especially after the Commune, which had ceased to be a state in the true sense of the term. The people's state has been flung in our teeth ad nauseum by the anarchists, although Marx's anti-Proudhon piece, and after it the Communist Manifesto, declare outright that with the introduction of the socialist order...
Just because you're beaten by the people's stick doesn't mean you're not being beaten by a stick, by the people's police and the people's state. But in this case, they're complaining about, like, look, it's just as the commune, it's like free state. Why are we using this language of a state? We're trying to, we're developing beyond states.
Trying to move beyond states.
Yeah, that's the point.
Society, the state will dissolve of itself and disappear. Now, since the state is merely a transitional institution of which use is made in the struggle, in the revolution, to keep down one's enemies by force, it is utter nonsense to speak of a free people's state. So long as the proletariat still makes use of the state, it makes use of it not for the purpose of freedom, but of keeping down its enemies, and as soon as there can be any question of freedom, the state as such ceases to exist. We would therefore suggest that Gemeinwesen, commonality, be universally substituted for state. It is a good old German word that can very well do service for the French commune. Quote,
so this idea that the state just dissolves of its own accord and then henceforth there's no need for a state, I kind of
or it becomes the functionary once there's a lack of enemies.
But that's the part that I'm kind of sticking on is, I mean, it takes on kind of a, the progress of history sort of narrative where we're just evolving to higher and higher conscious organizations. But is it inevitable that we just end at a stateless society and then there's never any enemies of communism or anarchism ever again, or are they just going to keep
Not
cropping
not
up?
in the same way that there are when you're transitioning.
True, true.
Um, and if, let's say, it's inevitable that the progression is not from nation states to no states, but to a global state,
Mm-hmm.
and thus the nation state is what's it is dissolved, or at least it fades into the background, just as local governments become
I see that.
subsidiary background noise to what's happening on the national level.
It's just the idea that, once we've vanquished our foes, they shall never reemerge. I don't know if that has
Well, not that they're
much
vanquished
background.
forever, but just like they're not able to disrupt what's established. That the status quo of a socialist economy is so it becomes, after 15, 30 years, what's the new normal.
No, no, yeah, I got that. But like,
You only need the dictatorship for 15 years, essentially. Like
sure.
the Green Party climate emergency, we're going to declare, martial law for the sake of battling the climate catastrophe, is like a 15-year window, and then we have a new normal, and then that
And
normal
I,
has
I
to
and I get that. But it's just like the
shift
idea
back,
that,
or shift to whatever the new
you
thing is.
know, you could have 1,000 years of fascist rule. Um, but you're still
To
going to have anarchists and communists cropping up again and again, even if they don't call it that. But people with the same
Mhm.
ideas are just going to come about, just not of
Yeah,
natural course of,
it may just be liberals,
yeah.
but that's the stuff of fantasy and sci-fi. I think in real history, like,
Well, yeah, of course, in real
um,
history, fascism never
they
lasts. But what I'm saying is like,
yeah, they couldn't even but as far as like autocratic rule and the development of liberalism, and then the development of socialists and anarchists,
yeah,
and that they're always like it there's I think it's idealist and part of a lot of fiction that, like, it's a natural byproduct of, well, no, I guess no, this is the point I'm making, that these things are developed in reaction to the autocracy or the authoritarianism. That it isn't that there are these natural state things that duke it out and one's dominant over the other. It's that because one's dominant, the other becomes stronger. Sort of a light and dark side from Star Wars kind of thing. And that, like, the guy, the truly interesting characters, though not really, but the kid, the one of the guys in Ahsoka, the actor died, unfortunately, but he's like, he wants to go beyond the cycle of light and dark, always switching sides and then
right.
never resolving, and how to go beyond that. And that's his dream, because he's just seen another, like, shifting, and he knows it's going to shift back and back and forth and back and forth. Um, Even though it's like, what does it mean when the light side wins? It's not like the slavery's gone and the galactic, the galaxy is actually, like, prospering and peaceful. It's never really like that. And the same goes for real history. It's never truly dominated or whatever. That even with, like, how autocratic and police statey the European governments were in the Victorian era, you still had all these workers movements and political organizing, and
Right.
maybe,
Yeah.
and again, like, this is something Howie will say over and over, that, like, we are stronger in opposition. It's like when there's something to fight, people will actually get off their butts and act.
No, it's
In the last 3 years, progressives have been lethargic and just
I've
whining
kind of seen
about the
that too.
right, like they
Yeah.
always do. But then, like, what are they working on?
Yeah.
I mean, that really makes headlines. It feels like
Right.
there's a forward movement. Um,
Uh,
it didn't seem like there. It didn't feel like. I mean, the forward movement is basically slowly taking it, being integrated in the Democratic Party and winning some races sometimes, but then it'll be, as far as my lifetime and any other lifetime in the past, it's easy come, easy go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You get, for every Jamal Bowman you elect, you're going to lose them in 2 cycles,
Yeah.
and in another 2 cycles, AOC will lose, and then the squad that's so freaking important and a symbol of democratic socialist progress will be a footnote,
Right.
just as previous progressives in previous Congresses going back a century
Yeah.
were also just is Wallace a household name? Fuck no. But that's as far as progressivism can go. A also ran or a possible VP contender
Yeah.
with a really cool platform, but didn't have the movement.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a just going back to that argument I was having with that guy about electoralism. Um, the argument I keep hearing from the vote blue,
Or
no matter who,
lesser evil.
the lesser evil, but also give us
Yeah.
4 more years to organize. And I'm like, what did we do with the last 4 years?
4 years.
What organization did we do? Like people just
I can tell
got
you, I
complacent.
failed in organizing, so I guess I'm criticizing myself as
Me
well.
too. Me too. I didn't.
But it's again, yeah, it's because like the left is not in opposition right now.
Yeah.
And even though
So
we absolutely fucking should be, we're in opposition when it comes to war crimes. But we're not when it comes to economics. Not when it came to moving Biden on college debt.
yeah,
Like
all those
there was
people
no
talking
move
about
for
we'll
that.
move him left.
I
We'll
should have
move
been.
him left. Like
Yeah,
the fuck.
yeah, but you never see it. Not
No,
not
it
in a
never
real way.
happens.
And
It's just
maybe those
complacency.
organizers will also then cut back. I'm like, well, you're not helping us. And of course, we can always kind of do that merry-go-round.
Sure.
But yeah, it's but you look at the Trump first Trump, the last Trump term, and progressives got off their ass, and ton of liberals got off their ass, and they were helping and helping
Yeah. It was the return of the left, actually. I mean,
of a way, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it didn't seem to make Bernie stronger though. That's what was odd about it. But it shows that like a lot of that energy was your rank and file Democrats who will oppose the the Republicans when they're in power. But that's that's the antagonism they see and live. That between their college educated Democratic Party and uneducated, as far as they can tell, but also corporate funded Republicans, as if their party isn't corporate funded. But again, it's not whether or not they do corporate bidding. It's how fast their knees hit the floor when the corporations tell them to lick their
That's just
balls.
such a great line.
Yeah. I have to look up exactly what Nader says, because he doesn't use a cocksucking metaphor or anything like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be that sort of metaphor. It can just be supplication.
Yeah, knees hit the floor.
Yeah.
Because it could just mean kiss the ring or kiss her ass.
Yeah, bow to. Right.
Bow. Yeah, bow. Kneel before before
bend the
Exxon.
knee. Right.
Bend the knee. Yes. Shove it down their throat. You know what I don't want shoved down my throat? That use of that phrase all the time. I was thinking about that washing my dishes. Of like if someone brought that up, like use that phrase, like, you know what, the last time someone shoved something down their throat was my father, and he was teaching me how to take a non-chewable pill poorly, because he's not really that great a teacher when it comes to not skiing. And in this case, being someone who had never not swallowed something I had not chewed before, I kind of needed more than just the instruction of just swallow it. So he did try to, in fact, force it down my throat, which was very uncomfortable and not helpful at all. It made me like panic, and it's like, yeah, I was not going to swallow. And I also tried chewing it, which tasted horrible. I'm like,
no, definitely not that.
I think I was 11 or something, but I was too old for chewables, because it was obviously a med, big boy pills. But I kept trying to swallow it, but just like it wouldn't go down.
If you haven't done it before, it is hard. It's like when I first got,
because it wasn't a smooth pill, it wasn't like a gel capsule.
Oh,
it was like
it was a
rougher
little pill, huh?
Yeah, the jack with edges,
Yeah,
and that's the fucking problem. Don't start kids on pills with edges.
absolutely not. No. That reminds me of when I first got contacts, and the ophthalmologist insisted on putting them in my eyes for me, and it was just not working. My eyelids would snap closed, and like I'm like, this
Mm.
is not helpful at all. Just let me do it myself and figure it out, even if it takes me 100 tries.
I mean, I had to give eye drop medication to a guy my at my shelter job, and he was a pro at getting it, you know. You know, but
Anyway,
because when I get my eyes dilated at the optometrist, like it is a struggle. I'm
hmm
like, God, I'm trying to keep it open, but like it's. But I'm also because I make my appointments in the morning. I'm like sleepy. I just want to be
yeah,
closed.
that probably doesn't help either.
Um. Okay, yeah, we're wrapping up. So hey, we got a
Got a good
quarter
ways
in.
in.
Yeah.
Got a good ways in.
Not bad.
Let's see what.
And we haven't even gotten to the critique yet. But
Yeah, we're
it's
just kind
not
of
too
setting the
long.
stage
It's
so far.
basically a few pages, I think. It's like a page. He just discusses what socialist politics really like should be made up of, and at least in his day, right?
hmm
That should change a little bit, but obviously informs. But I think what we've been the theme of our grambling here is that like a lot hasn't changed. It's, even though everything has changed,
Yeah.
more or less, especially the scale of things, the intensity, the complexity. Maybe it's that complexity that makes it that like our solutions need to be really complex. And then I think that's kind of what Marx
Well,
is
maybe.
theorizing in his response and his critique is that like you're trying to make it simple, but it ain't that simple. You know, you're still thinking like somebody in the Renaissance era. You know, you can boil things down to an easy answer, but the easy answers never worked out.
hmm
Not when it came to plague control, and not when it came to colonization, and certainly not now when it comes to labor organizing. And when it comes to international politics, or just local politics, even it's more complex.
hmm
And but I mean, that's where the universal education plays a part, and that's what they were fighting for. Getting that but yeah, there's always more to learn, and
Absolutely.
I relish it, and it's my bag, baby. This is good to go through. I think I forget if I read this at one point, but I probably did.
It's not
But
one that I've read before.
it would have been 12 years ago, like
Yeah,
post Occupy. I was going through
sure.
reading theory, getting back to basic Marxism since I had gone through all the practice, but without much theory. So, and I could see the results of that. So it's like, okay, can I read more theory and maybe that would help? And it kind of has, and it kind of hasn't. It certainly has made me more aware of like and able to identify problems and when people doing things that are going to blow up or not work out, even if it looks like they're gaining ground short term. Uh, anyway, and that's why I've been growing that library behind me, and
hmm
I got a Mark section too.
That's
But
cool.
but I also have a lot of contemporary stuff and projects and what
Yeah,
people are
yeah.
working on, and that's all good too.
Very cool. But yeah,
So
it
anyway,
feels good to get
uh,
back into the theory though. So I appreciate you,
yeah,
bringing up the idea to do this.
and I'm always racking myself. The big question for me is sort of a housing question, but just like how to tackle it. But it's also, I guess, more personality versus goals. Um, I want to start some kind of housing co-op or firm or
Okay.
enterprise that goes beyond what's being created now. I think there's a sort of part of me that wants to join in on what's happening now,
hmm
but I'm afraid it'll just be a repeat experience of the last 10 to 15 years where I joined someone else's project to help out and it's their way or it's just a way that's not radical. It's not part of some revolutionary agenda.
Yeah.
I wanted to start something that is something like a permanent real estate cooperative, like the one in Oakland, which looking at their bylaws, it's like it is radical, it is anti-capitalist, but it's also black, and it has that kind of black-ish, black-centered politics, kind of like there's a fear that only certain communities can do these things well, because of their minority position, that they have access to a lot more varied grants to help minority enterprises or people in the hood. And if I were to try to start a real estate cooperative that isn't dealing with things in the hood, like, because that's public or grant money is available for things you do in the hood, but that entails a lot of like not helping like the general proletariat, only the people who are on the margins. And as long as you're just helping people on the margins, the people who are struggling, who aren't in the total margins but are marginalized or alienated.
Yeah.
Alienated isn't the same as marginalized, but everyone's alienated. I want to help the alienated, not just the marginalized. And I
Yeah,
think too many of the projects, community, or organizing is about the marginalized. And like, yeah, that is the people who need help the most.
but yeah,
And
at the
so
same time,
I'm conflicted there. And I'm conflicted also. I look at what the Oakland Perk has done. They only have 2 buildings, but like they've got millions of dollars in assets. And I look at all the work they're doing and how many people are involved, and that scares me. Why does it scare me? Or rather, not for and fear isn't the wrong word, but it makes me anxious that I could accomplish this, that I could find the right people to work with, and that would it wouldn't just implode after a year or so, like all the other things that I see in my area.
yeah.
Um, Now there are certain institutions like the Community Loan Fund that hasn't imploded, that has stayed the test of time. United Tenants of Albany is another. But these are also more reformist in nature. And to that effect, they're starting not a real estate cooperative, but they're calling it a community investment trust. Um, so it's kind of acting like a real estate co-op, but it's not. It's not owned. No, they are going to own a very large community centric building,
Oh yeah.
and they're going to take, and it's an investment trust though. So it is, I mean, the positive aspect is to convert all firms into some kind of trust, because
Hmm.
a trust can have a purpose that isn't profit making. So,
That makes sense.
a in the community loan fund and the community land trust, exist. But I want something that's also can maybe act more like a business, because otherwise you have nonprofits that also act like businesses way more than they do trusts.
Hmm.
Even though they kind of have the mission of a trust, they're hamstrung by the nonprofit complex
Yeah.
and form. And they're getting recognized, they get awards, but I'm like, it looks like they're just running around in circles, and they're like, if their victory in the long term is just 5 buildings saved from gentrification, and or something like that. Um, but I don't know. But I see the real estate co-op, the perk, like they're not so much owning, but they're also managing a bunch. So they actually are, their list of successes involve also like getting buildings out of the hands of slumlords.
Yeah. That's
And
huge.
then looking at their progress report, I'm like, holy shit, it is more than just owning like 2 buildings, which they haven't even started rehabbing yet. But one of which is already in a state where it's already rehabbed, actually, but it's just a blank canvas as far as function goes. And the building itself isn't actually like a piece of shit; it just looks like one on the outside. But they're also doing this in a part of Oakland that is like the strip that is complete like blight. So um it's ready to be engaged into sort of like Co-op Jackson, where even though Co-op Jackson is only like a neighborhood away from the downtown, it's also a blighted, because Jackson is a shit area,
Yeah.
or blighted city. where everything's kind of cheap and stuff. But it's so exciting to watch what they're doing and how like they become household names of left conferences and stuff, and to be able to do something like that in the Northeast beyond just like a one house co-op or something. But at the same time, it's like I feel pretty alone because the people I'm able to work with and stuff like they got their own lives and hobbies, and I've got my bandmate, and he's a music guy first and foremost, you know. And when I talk about when I mentioned, when I asked him like, would you ever settle down in a big housing co-op with me? And he's like, well, not really. I want to be able to move about. And he mentions that many of us on the left have this semi-nomadic feeling to ourselves. We
Hmm.
want to be able to move around, be flexible, and I'm like, ugh, but that means there isn't enough people with roots.
Right.
We're gonna stick around and invest $10,000. But then
That's
again, it's
true.
like, well, I guess to really build socialism, I got to bring in on all those non-radical people, but do care about community and can make the case that like a real estate co-op is the way to ensure that the business district doesn't implode every 15 years,
Hmm.
as ours has done in Albany, where 20 years the bid, and it's the same guy always running it, and everyone's both like they're in power and no one challenges them, but also a lot of people hate them, or they like it's like, oh, they just like they don't do anything and everything's going downhill with him on watch. But at the same time, it's like, well, what do you expect him to do? He's just a community organizer. He doesn't control the flows of capital in and out of the city, because it turns out like and this is something that, well, it was just a daily conversation. But my bandmate basically like he visited Somerville outside of Boston, and he commented on like there's just so much to do. Like, so it's like, would I want to stay here? But it's like, well, if there was enough people with good incomes here, there would be lots to do.
Hmm.
But everyone really doesn't have a good income. Even the state workers are proletarian in nature, paycheck to
Really.
paycheck. Yeah, we're able to afford a house eventually, but just that.
Yeah.
Like I met someone at a pesto party, and her kind of big project that makes her social success is that she bought a house from the land trust, or at least purchased, the house, not the property,
Sure.
and she used the land bank to purchase a lot that's not directly next door, but one over, and she's gardening in it.
Hmm.
And that's her dream. But when I ask her what she does and what she's living, she did that sort of normal Gen X thing of or I don't know, I didn't ask her age, but she was a bit older than me. But it's like, oh, it's just a state, she's in a state office, but she didn't like have anything interesting to say about it. She just kept repeating, it's just a job, it's just a source of income. I don't like She doesn't put any like emotional effort into it at
Sure.
all,
Yeah. Yeah.
as I do, where it's like, well, when I work in a unit, I want to ensure that at least it's a unit that is helping people, at least even
Hmm.
indirectly.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not so hot on my current position actually, in the data crunching office. It's just because we're not directly interacting with anyone in the public. I think there's that. It's like we're really just serving like the chancellor and the administration, and we're
Sure.
using data, and it's like, but we ourselves will comment how like the conclusions we come to with the data is just the doy, kind of conclusions that
Uh.
any social worker will suggest,
Hmm.
but they don't have the data backing them up. But the data, in order the data to be good and useful, so fucking much has to be going into it. Millions of dollars of technical infrastructure
Yeah.
and bureaucratic infrastructure to
Hmm.
feed it. Um, to just say, yeah, you need to fund tutors, and you need to, but I mean, it's good to know what's going on, right? Um, I guess I'm just finding it more boring than I should
Yeah.
as someone as the assistant, but um, I find it less boring than probably other assistants could, and that's why I was hired, because I was like, I'm kind of interested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I guess it's been a
See the
year,
purpose.
so
Yeah.
now it's starting to kind of wear on me. I'm like,
Yeah.
now it's been another year, and we put out another, report and another the fact book, the new fact
Sure.
book. It's like the turning. It's like every year you've been doing this for 15 years, and it's like, what kind of progress has the college system made? It's progressing at times, even with all the headlines of, oh,
Yeah,
look at
yeah,
all the programs and the nanotech and the AI investment, blah 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 blah
yeah,
blah
yeah.
blah. And yet the numbers are all going down. It's enrollment and hours, and then okay. Well, good night, Zach. I've rambled enough.
Yeah, yeah. Have a good night as well. Thanks for joining me once again. Look forward to next
Thank you
week,
for
continuing
giving me the
on
time.
with Critique of the Gotha program.
The critique of the
Or the
critique.
Gotha program, if we're gonna
The gata.
Gotha. Yeah.
Eins everything. Yeah, that the speaker needs to practice his German. I think his pronunciation is terrible for some of the words he was giving. Anyway,
uh,
good night, Zach.
yeah.
Good
Have a
night.
good one. See you next week. All right, and that was Dan Platt of the Albany Greens. It does feel good to get back into the theory aspect of bread theory. Like, gaming is fun, and I really enjoyed branching out into doing the gaming stuff. Um, gives space to do more freeform, political pontificating and theorizing, but it does also lack in that intellectual heft, I guess, that does come from reading theory. So really glad to get back into it, and looking forward to doing more of it. So we're about a third of the way through Tika the Gotha or Gotha program. I think it is the only. It was only the one. Oh, what did I do there? To do that. Let's see. Yeah, there's no like part two or anything, so I think this is the only one. Pretty short thing, only an hour, so we're 20 minutes in. I guess it's an hour and 16, but still, just about a third of the way through. Um, yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's gonna do it for me tonight. Let's see. What's happening on Twitch right now? See if there's anyone worth shouting out before we make our way down the road. Let's see. Squiddier. Countdown to the bell rat. That looks funny. See if anyone's talking about stuff that's cool. It's relevant to today. No, not that, not that. Hmm. Let's see. Let's look at
My name is Lucy.
real rad home. Talking about current events. So we will shout out real rad home. And we will do that in the Twitch message. So go check out real rad home. Very cool guy. From Australia, I want to say. Let's make sure I get the name real rad down. Rad home. All right, so yeah, all that message there. Check out real rad home, and yeah, see you all on Sunday. I wish I had more time for streaming during the week, but so I could get my base of viewers back up. But I just don't. Being in grad school right now, I just don't have the time to put in the effort needed to build back up. So it'll be this for now. Anyway, have a good night, y'all, and see you Sunday.